Welcome to the Fall to Grace. I'm Cyan.
And I'm Connor.
Today we're going to start by answering a listener question we received last week. She asked us, basically, is there a way to connect with the divine that doesn't go through form? Another way you can think of this is, can I conceptualize God without going through a deity or kind of like a particular religious channel? So she was kind of asking, like, do I have to go through a Jesus figure or a Krishna figure or even, Buddhism? Or is it just something that I can tap into, kind of pure consciousness, just tap into that divine? So that's what we're going to get into today. What do you think about all that, Connor?
Yeah, thanks, Cyan. And thank you to our listener for the question. These are very important questions, and some of them are very big. And I think the crux of this question is really this idea of, do I have to be in a religion? Do I have to conceptualize the divine the same way other people conceptualize the divine? And it's something that's kept many of us from the divine throughout our lives, that there is kind of this Christian notion. We have to be kind of moving directly through Jesus. We have to accept Jesus as our personal savior in order to be saved. And that turns a lot of people off. And it's turned a lot of seekers off just because they don't necessarily connect to any one of these characters, whether it be a Christian character, whether it be a Hindu character, whatever it is. And it's left many of us kind of desiring our own kind of creative expression of God. And that's what this question sounds like to me. I am a member of a number of 12-step programs, and one of the things that makes these 12-step programs so successful and inspires so many recovery journeys is this idea that you can have a higher power of your own conception. It is absolutely possible to access the divine without using or leaning on one of these characters or one of these forms, as she had so put it. So the conversation that I want to have today is just around that. We need some sort of help to be able to access the divine, but also just help in our daily lives. We've talked so much about the fear that we have. We've talked how rampant the mind can actually be and how it jumps from place to place to place and how it likes to solve problems. And it's a real problem for us because it causes us to suffer. As we think a problem is kind of solvable by ourselves, and as long as we are the ultimate authority for problem solving, many of these thoughts and problems just live in our head, and we start to fantasize about how we can solve them, what we should have said better, who we can bring in, what it's a huge loop. It's kind of a fantasy loop that lives in our mind that if we only manage well, we'll be able to get what we want out of any given situation. I think the reality of that situation is far more that, and I think many of us can conceptualize this. This is not a hard reach of an idea, but that many of the circumstances in our lives, and especially our problems, are not necessarily things we can control. So a higher power is about being able to handle that inability to control things, to control given situations or people or things. And for that, we do need to turn to something higher. So having a divine that you connect with is extremely, extremely important. And if you don't connect with some of the more traditional religious figures that we think of, that is okay. They do not have to be your solution. You can find your own way, and you can access this divine through a number of different ways.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, last week we were talking about that unchanging self in our episode about identity. If you haven't listened to that, please do so. It's good. That unchanging self is God. And so if it comforts you and makes more sense to our little puny human brains to assign a figure to that unchanging self, which is kind of what a deity is, then that's fantastic. I think that's like the purpose of deities, is to understand a concept that's way too big for our brains to ever be able to conceptualize. It's like if you've ever read the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna reveals himself, like Arjuna is like tripping, to say the least, in that scene in the book, because it's not for our human brains to conceptualize. But we make all these drawings and like try to wrap our brains around it, and it's very helpful. So if you take comfort in a particular deity, then that's great. Yeah, it's not the end all be all. Unchanging self is always beneath all of this, and it is accessible with or without a deity. People since the dawn of time have loved deities. I love deities. I find it extraordinarily helpful. But with that being said, I know a lot of people, and even myself included, who have been really grossed out in a lot of ways by organized religion's actions in the world, and therefore have a distaste for form at all or for deity worship at all. And I think that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of bad stuff that's been done.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. This is a fundamental problem again that many of us have, right? Is that we've had direct confrontation within religion. We've seen what religions do in the world. We've seen situations, even recently, in situations like Gaza, where religious becomes the basis for oppression and faith becomes the basis for oppression. And many of us turn away from any concept of spirituality as a result of seeing how religions have operated in the world. So many of these forms are naturally pretty disgusting to many of us. But the idea here, and kind of what we've been talking about in the most recent episodes, is this: it has nothing to do with the religions. It has everything to do with you and your mind and your life. So spirituality, as kind of opposed to religion, is far more about finding a way to access the divine such that you may be helped in your own journey and in your own life. And in that way, we don't necessarily have to be conforming to any one religion's belief. We are the individuals, and each individual does have a different form of creative expression that they want to be able to express. As I said, I'm a member of a major 12-step group, and there are a number of different conceptions in any given room for that. Many people conceive of the divine as something like nature or the ocean. These are things that are very evidently larger than us. Others conceive of a more general God, and some of them do conceive of a Jesus or in my case, a Hanuman figure. The higher powers take many, many different forms, and it's more about being able to find a form that you can work with. When we are back in our egos and when we are trying to problem solve, many of these thoughts live in our heads and they create a lot of discord in ourselves internally. We are constantly judging situations. We are constantly figuring out how to get what we want. And our mind convinces us, if we act well, if we say the right things, if we do the right things, that we will be able to get that which we want. And that is extremely painful because it is always disappointing and it is always impermanent. The thing that we want, even if we get it, does not necessarily fill the need that our brain has told us it's going to. So this is the predicament. There's no real way to win so long as I, myself, am the ultimate authority in my life. So this is why a more generalized higher power is important. Now, on the idea of form, however, form is a way to make devotion and worship extremely tangible. So many people do gravitate to some sort of form because it gives you an object of your worship. It gives you something that you can actually turn these things over to. When we are talking about turning things over to God, what we are doing is recognizing the limitations of our own ego-driven existence. We are saying, I don't control every situation here. Many of the circumstances in our lives, and especially within our problems, are outside of our control. But when the mind believes that it's the ultimate authority, it still searches for ways to solve an unsolvable problem. So what we're trying to do when we turn things over is to tell our mind that it is not in control of this situation, that something else has taken over control of the situation. And in that way, we kind of liberate the problem. We liberate the problem solving to something larger than us, even if that is just the reality of things. I need to surrender to the way things really are. And this just really gets into that idea of surrender. But everybody can have their own thing that they are surrendering to. That's what is important here. And nobody needs to tell you what your deity is or what your form needs to be. It is yours. And in that way, it is about you finding your own life and your own way to succeed.
Well, this is what we were talking about in the identity episode. It's uncomfortable to be self-obsessed. Even if you don't realize how uncomfortable it is, you will once you start to walk the path further. It's uncomfortable to live in your neuroses. It's uncomfortable to be angry all the time and afraid all the time. You have to come back to the unchanging self again and again and again and again. If you've ever taken psychedelics or had kind of like a mystical experience, you might have tapped into that feeling of loving, calm compassion. That's kind of how I think, I think that's the undercurrent of everything. I kind of think that's the expression of God. And I think that's the unchanging self, actually. And so, if you do decide to choose a form to relate to that, you have almost unlimited options and you should choose the flavor that gets you there, Connor gave the example of Hanuman, who represents devotion and service. And in the last episode, I was talking about Kali, who represents bloody boons and fierce grace. And, if you want Jesus, who's very like loving and giving and all those great things, or if you want the ocean, who also like represents this calm grace, this calm compassion like God, or if you look at the night sky as your deity, it kind of represents the same. You can access the unchanging self through infinite ways, I would say.
One of the things about a God is that God would ultimately have to be formless. The God who runs the world and is present in everything does not necessarily have a form in our daily lives. But form gives us a more comfortable way to lean into God and to access the divine. The forms themselves are very much symbols of those things. If we are worshiping the ocean, for example, if we take a more pagan perspective on this, I can worship the depth of the ocean. I can worship the calm of the ocean. I can worship the fierceness of the ocean. I understand that the ocean is working not without me, right? This is outside of myself. And I can connect with those various aspects of something as powerful as the ocean. Many of these deities, and this is why I love Hinduism so much, is because there are millions of gods within Hinduism. And each of these gods just represents a different face of God. They are all different aspects of the divine, much the same way that a Jesus is at one aspect of the divine and Mary may be another aspect of the divine. Many of these religions are full of characters who represent different aspects of divine. This is the many faces of God. So, in your example with Hanuman, this is just something that I connect with more than anything. Hanuman is my primary god, and it's because Hanuman represents purity of devotion and a full open heart. And those are things that I personally aspire to be. And that is the kind of deified version of my aspiration. Kali, for example, is this fierce grace, and she is kind of fast and hard and fierce, right? And so somebody who is fast and hard and severe kind of person would absolutely connect with my Kali.
Are you calling me out?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. But it's not a judgment. It's not a judgment. It's to say that we are very different people, and we have very different aspects of ourselves, and we have very different things that we connect with. Some of us may connect with love. Some of us may connect with peace. Some of us may connect with joy. Some of us may connect with a tornado, right? Like we can see the divine in everything because the divine is in everything. So however you want to access that is up to you. But the big thing is that we need to be able to get outside of ourselves. We need to be able to escape our ego in some way. Form kind of creates a duality wherein I am handing something over to this form, or I am worshiping this form. It naturally kind of exists in a two form. And that is extremely comfortable for our minds. What we really know about spirituality and about religion, and a little bit about what you're talking about, Cyan, is that it is just kind of one big, unchanging, kind of very, very stable, calm energy force. I mean, it is something that is underpinned under all reality. And any kind of form of two, right? Even if it is me and a god, is still existing apart from that oneness. But that two form really helps me to connect with the singular. My path is the bhakti path. This is the path of devotion in the Hindu path. It's a practice. It's a form of yoga. It's a way to access God. And it is very obsessed with this. It is obsessed with coming to the one via the two, that you can love your deity so much that you dissolve into the love and into the oneness. But you need the two in order to have something to love. I can't just push love out of me necessarily. I have to have things to love. So that gives me a channel for my love. One other part of this question, which I'm curious to hear your opinion on, Cyan, was this idea of, do I even need a form, right? Do I have to have something to be an intermediary for me and the divine?
No, you don't. And I kind of touched on this, I think, earlier in the episode. You really technically don't. But then again, I mean, I think we were put in these human bodies with these human brains and all of the limitations that comes with for a reason, you know? You don't need it, but it makes it so much easier. Even if you do conceive of God in a very abstract, nebulous kind of way, that's fine too. But you're right, like it is hard to just push love out of you into kind of nothingness, you know? It makes it a heck of a lot easier to choose something, even a doorknob. It's something you said.
Yeah. This is a big thing in 12-step programs, is they tell you to worship a doorknob because it's outside of you. It is something that is not you. And in that way, we're dealing with the me problem by having a form and giving something to the form. So I'm a big fan of form personally, but I also agree that it's not necessary. There are many paths, and many of them are essentially Buddhist, which don't necessarily have an object of devotion or an object of worship. That's the fundamental belief. The fundamental belief behind either a formed religion or a formless religion, like a Buddhism, are very, very similar, which is that this ego is a problem and it needs to be handled. It needs to be resolved in order for me to find lasting peace. So a more Buddhist perspective on this is to drop into the formless, drop everything. Try to live out of duality as much as possible, as quickly as possible. This is what's in Zen. This is what's in Dzogchen, is the idea that we can just drop it naturally.
Exactly. I would argue that they're all actually the same, but it's just a matter of, and this is a question you can ask yourself. Do I want to just drop it? Or in my case, do I want to burn it? It becomes kind of more of a game. Or do I want to love it away? Or do I want to serve it away, serve people food until it kind of goes away, until I like become enlightened, basically. These are all just different flavors that are available to all of us, and you should just choose your own flavor, but they're all pointing to the same exact thing.
Absolutely. And it's the fundamental human condition. I mean, this is the idea of original sin, is that we are constantly judging things and that our ego has taken over in many ways. All of them have the same problem and they have different solutions. All paths lead to one place, which is kind of this dissolution of mind. And it's extremely peaceful and it's extremely loving. And many of these people have used a variety of different forms to get there, or a formless approach to it. I think it is very much to do with the individual. And many of these traditions offer different paths for very individual people. We don't see a lot of people who are going to God or who are practicing compassion or who are practicing kindness in their daily lives who are also in churches. And so there's a disconnect there. And we've used it as this wholesale blanket kind of reason to reject spirituality. But the problem hasn't gone away and many of us continue to suffer. So this is about resolving the suffering that's within us and finding ways to cope with the things that cause us to suffer. So for some of us, that will be a form. For others, it will not. And it's really about asking yourself what is right for you and looking around and trying new things and trying your own thing to see what is working for you. What is causing you to suffer less? What is causing you to think less? What is helping you to channel more love, kindness, and compassion in your life? And what is keeping you out of your hate and anger?
It's not enough to just choose a path. It's a daily practice. I just saw this video on my For You page today about this pastor who was talking about how he wanted to run over some protesters recently with his truck. He was very filled with fear. It was coming out as anger. And he was talking about this to the whole congregation.
I mean, it's so unfortunate that those are the most vocal figures that we have representing religion now today. If you're listening to this, you're probably not a fan of the mega churches and you're probably not a fan of kind of mainstream Christianity. And mainstream Christianity does not deal with the mind very much. It very much trusts Jesus and God to resolve these problems for us. They trust him for God to give us what we want. They think, the second coming of Jesus is when they will be absorbed into heaven. It's really missed the mark. Heaven and hell are very much states of consciousness more than places you go after you die. When your mind is torturing you with self-pity, with fear, with anguish, this is hell, right? And many of us have this experience of being so depressed that we can't get up, or being so angry that we do want to drive through a crowd of people. And it's just a matter of how we deal with those things. If we can deal with those things and we can drop those things and we can give those things to something greater than ourselves, then we are dealing with the problem of the mind and we are finding relief and we are finding peace and tranquility within. Soren Kierkegaard has this quote, and it's something along the lines of prayer is not about influencing God. Prayer has nothing to do with influencing God. Rather, it's about changing the condition of the person who is praying, changing fundamentally who we are. When we turn the problem inwards and we start to recognize that it is our mind that's the problem, prayer becomes extremely, effective. And these practices become extremely, extremely effective because our practice is then what we channel to find that peace within ourselves. But the mind is extremely active. The mind is incessant. And so it will come back. It's not like we just do this and we do it every Sunday and we're done. We do have to do these things over and over again because turning things over is constant.
Yeah, let me read that Kierkegaard quote. And then Connor also made a little note after it that I really like. I'll read that too. The Kierkegaard quote is, "The function of prayer is not to influence God, but rather to change the nature of the one who prays." And then Connor's little aside after is, "Connection to the divine has never been about getting what we want. It is about transforming the individual who is discontent with what he has. As we pray, we disempower the need for control and we decrease our longing for more, more, more. We find that the quieted mind and the open heart are the rewards we have always been seeking." Yeah, that's how we create our own heaven or our own hell. I mean, that pastor is clearly living in a version of hell if he's that afraid and that fear is like manifesting his anger. That's a miniature hell that he's living in, unfortunately. And when we really it starts to click and we get it, that's like a little miniature heaven that we get to live on earth.
Well, I mean, he's such a good example of a closed heart and a closed mind, right? When people are saying those things and people are preaching those things, it's because their hearts are closed and their minds are closed. What you find when you do these things and you start to open your heart and you start to open your mind, you start to see that this is where tranquility lies. This is where you find serenity and peace in your life. And that's the essence of lasting joy. Our mind tells us that joy is attainable if you add the right components to the equation. If you get more money, if you find more people, if you do more fun things, then you will find lasting happiness. And what I've found and what many people have found is that the mind will always tell you that. Even if you get those things, even if you have all the money in the world, you will still find yourself miserable because there's always more to chase. And so it's a predicament. I mean, and it's a paradox and it's a lie. So this is coping with that lie. By turning this over to something greater than ourselves, we find the internal peace that you're talking about.
Yes. And when we worship something, it teaches us how to worship the people around us, who are also expressions of God. So that's really kind of what the whole practice is about too. Like when we learn how to treat the divine, when we learn how to treat Divine Mother, I can actually treat my own mother with more love and respect and decency. And when I really take Jesus into my heart, I can actually volunteer at the food bank and love my neighbor and all these things. When you open yourself up to this undercurrent of love, or I should say loving, calm compassion, you naturally become more and more loving, calm, and compassionate. It's just like if I do A, then B follows. And more compassion begets more compassion, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Like so many of these religions and what they offer, and one of the most beautiful things that they offer are these ideas of myth. And many of these myths are what we connect to. If we're talking about angels and demons, what we need to realize is that we're not talking about necessarily real angels and demons that lie outside of us, that are fighting over our eternal souls. They are fighting within you. They are in your head every single day. You have equal capacity for love and hate within you. And so it's more about who's going to win that battle. The angels and the demons are entirely inside of you. And we are trying to help the angels win by channeling more calm compassion, more love for our neighbor. And in that way, we find more peace because we find the heaven within far more abundantly. What I've realized in my spiritual journey is that when I am judging, and when I don't have love for others, I'm really the one who suffers. So when I see Hanuman and when I see stories about Hanuman and things like that, it speaks to this part of me that longs for that kind of love and for that kind of compassion and for that, person who is suffering when he doesn't have those things. And what's so beautiful about this is that there is something that would speak to you, even if it is the ocean or it can be the large oak tree down the street. These things are bigger than you. You can lean into the oak tree being this calm, steady form of life in the world that takes in sunlight and takes in water and, takes in CO2 and spits out oxygen. Like that is an equally beautiful expression of things. It's operating without your control and it is something that you can lean on. What we have to find is somewhere we can put all of the stuff that we have within us.
Mm-hmm. This stuff is way too big for you to hold. You don't have to carry it on your shoulders.
And it's painful when you do. I mean, and many of us go to our graves trying to carry these things and trying to wrest happiness from these dissatisfying situations. So the goal is to be more content with the discontent, is to become less kind of irritable and less antsy, less needing to go somewhere else, less needing for more things, because that's the essence of tranquility and peace and serenity, is not needing more, being able to relax into the peace, which is very hard for us, especially now. I mean, we have a lot of content, we have a lot of noise, we have a lot going on in our lives. Our minds are the attention spans of the American population and much of the world's population are shorter than ever. Our mind is telling us that we need the next reel, that we need the next piece of food, that we need the next show. All the time, we have all of this kind of world that is offering us those temporary solutions that we so much seek for. Right? I want to find the best movie. I want to find the best show. I want to find these things that'll create some happiness in me. But we misconstrue happiness for joy. Joy is lasting. Happiness is fleeting.
I think that is a little bit of a confusing phrase, like joy versus happiness. I think it would be better to call it like peace versus happiness. Peace is what happens when you access that unchanging thing, I'd say.
I mean, in my experience, it's very joyful. And they're very different emotions in my mind. And many people have not experienced true joy because people are constantly chasing happiness. Joy comes from a place of self-arising. It sits with you. It is a place where you don't need anything else to be happy. It's where you don't need to change anything about your environment to make your mental state a little better. Those are happy things. Like, oh, you gave me a gift. That made me happy. Right? But that happiness fades. The more I do this and the more I escape my mind and turn things over to something bigger than myself, the more free I get. And the essence of that freedom is joyful. Satchitananda, baby.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I do see you engaging with the feeling of joy quite a bit, like our Tuesday group and stuff, which is so great. That's not the feeling that I usually get, I don't think. It's more like peace, I guess, but I don't know if that's me not being as far on the path or if that's like, I just love the feeling of peace. So maybe that's kind of what I'm after here. I don't know.
Yes, totally. And this is it, right? You connect more with peace and I connect more with joy, right? What Cyan's talking about with our Tuesday group is that we host this little kirtan. And what a kirtan is basically the recitation of a number of different mantras set to songs with a lot of drum banging and a lot of dancing. And it's pretty ridiculous. I have brought many people to that kirtan who have been totally turned off and shut down by the whole thing. And that's just because they don't connect with it the way I do. And that's totally fine. You do not have to follow my path. And I do not make anybody follow my path. But I'm willing to offer my path to anybody who wants to take it because the joy is what I connect to and the joy is what I found. Many of the Buddhists that I talk to in my daily life are all about peace and all about just leaning into full consciousness because that's what resonates most with them. That does not resonate nearly as profoundly with me as the ecstasy of joy and devotion.
So maybe that's a good place to start is when do you feel most connected? Like, I think that's a good question to ask yourself because yeah, I know you feel most connected at kirtan. That's bhakti yoga, as Connor was saying earlier. I would say that I feel most connected doing seva, which is like selfless service. When I'm like cleaning the temple floors and stuff, I feel extraordinarily connected. I also feel very connected during puja. Those are the two that I far and away feel most connected with. But ask yourself, like if it is walking along the beach, then boom, that's at least a breadcrumb that you can follow until you find the next breadcrumb. Or yeah, if it is singing, if you love to go to concerts and you find that really fulfilling and you love that like collective effervescence feeling, then you might be a bhakti person. And you might, I mean, it's not like you need to go to a temple and do bhakti. You can just keep going to concerts, but tap into that thing when you feel that feeling of collective effervescence. Well, that's all we have time for today. Thank you guys so much for listening. You can find us on Instagram at The Fall to Grace. Our TikTok is the same, actually. And please feel free to send us messages and questions. Just like this episode was all a listener question. We love to answer them. It's so fun for us. So
it's fun and it's useful. It is the best way to move down the path, is to get clarity on the questions you have. We are happy to take your questions, and we hope that more of you will send them in because it helps us figure out what we're doing here, and it helps you figure out what you're doing there.
Exactly, yeah. So catch us next Monday.
Every Monday.
Every Monday.
Yeah, we love you guys so much. Thank you so much for listening to us. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye.